Did you ever wonder how and why and when the railroad came to the valley? Well, in today's Throwback Thursday, our historical commissioner, Eugene Fernandez, gives us the story.
We are in front of a piece of living history for Brownsville, but it's a shell of its former self. Just as anything with the railroad industry, you dealt with heavy machinery, heavy men, and heavy fortunes. The train came into Brownsville in 1904. It was 1 year in construction from Robstown to Brownsville. That's 140 miles. Now, the story behind it actually began a lot earlier than that. There had been attempts to bring a railroad into Brownsville since about 1853 when Captain King started his King Ranch up the country. But those attempts all failed, and there were probably 5 attempts to bring a railroad into Brownsville. The people of this part of the country who colonized this area knew the importance of a railroad because there's no way out for their cattle, for all of the freight that they produced and all of that. And farming couldn't get launched because there was no train to move fresh produce up the country. In the entire history of railroad involvement in this part of the country, it was known by all that transport out was extremely important for any kind of farming or ranching and all of that. So there were 4 principles that got this railroad going after many attempts that had happened before that. And they were Benjamin Franklin Yoakum, kingpin. He was a railroad magnate. Then there was Uriah Lott. He was the developer. Then you had Captain King, and you had Mifflin Kennedy, the ranchers. And then in the ranchers, of course, then you had, of course, Francisco Ituria and Armstrong. They put this deal together, finally, in 1902. There were a handful of obstacles that were very, very big looming over this project that almost didn't make it happen. You had the yellow fever epidemic of 1904. But prior to that, you had Mr. Harriman, who was the head of Southern Pacific Railway, who did not see it convenient that we had this railroad down here because it went in competition with him. Now, that was a huge obstacle because, to tell you how the people in this part of the country remembered that, they didn't let Southern Pacific back into this part of the country until 1926. Other obstacles were a flood that happened in 1904 during that 1 year of construction. You had train wrecks. You had 3 of them during that period. You had the financial market in Chicago that made a dip for a brief period. All of these affected very, very critically the building of this railroad. The entire cost of the project after it was all finished was $9 million. Can you imagine back in 1904? The winds of war came in 1916, and the federal troops had a dramatic need for rail service. The north-south main rail line tapped into U.S. Army reserves from Iowa, Illinois, and other northern points as the Mexican Revolution was smoldering. The railroad brought a land boom and the explosion of farming to the area. We had the grand players of John Klausner, Lon C. Hill, Frank Rebb, John Sherry, and T.J. Hooks enter the picture. Marketing was spread to the farmers throughout the Midwest to bring them down here by our new railroad to invest in farms. The beautiful architecture of the 1920s was captured in the full range of Valley train stations. The crown jewel spinoff was the El Jardín Hotel alongside the Missouri Pacific Terminal in Brownsville. Can you imagine the vision that these people had to build this whole system and that it gave to our culture? Their contribution was immense, and the rest is history. For KVEO News, I'm Eugene Fernandez.